I trusted her completely, but she betrayed me. I woke up to an empty bed and a broken heart. I looked at our joint account, emptied, just like my soul. Then, fate pushed me to save a stranger in danger, changing my path forever. A new heart, healed by unexpected love. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. Jim was feeling really down. His marriage was finished. He felt like his whole life was falling apart. How could she do something like this? With these thoughts in his mind, he left Morrison's restaurant, went back to the hotel, picked up his belongings, but left hers. Maybe she would remember to pick them up, her clothes, makeup, and her husband. After that, Jim checked out and went home, or rather to what felt like a haunted house where he was the ghost. It was time for a change. He drove up to his quiet home and walked in, feeling the silence weigh on him like a heavy blanket. Tears came as he sat in the living room, thinking of his children, sinking deeper into sadness. Soon he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed a bottle of whiskey, drank a good amount, and then threw the bottle into the fireplace, smashing the framed wedding photo above it. He yelled, quickly coming to his senses. "Enough," he said loudly. "I can't take this anymore." He looked at the clock. It was 10:24 p.m. Thinking of revenge, he went online and transferred all their money into his account, leaving just a little behind. He wasn't rich, but it was enough for now. He then wrote letters explaining everything and planned to send them to various media outlets. Jim also wrote letters to his kids, Emma and Tommy, to be opened when they turned 18. He hoped they would understand why he had to leave, even if Linda didn't tell them the truth. He packed a gym bag with clothes and essentials, showered, and changed into clean clothes. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time to leave. He made coffee, wrote a final note to Linda, and threw his wedding ring on it. He then destroyed their marriage certificate, splashed ketchup over it for dramatic effect, and got the coffee ready. Satisfied he'd made his point, he packed up, opened the garage, and prepared for a long trip. He took his guns, which she had never liked, and loaded his truck with camping gear. As he left, thoughts of his children worried him. He questioned his decision but felt it was all he had left. He tossed the house keys on the garage floor, left everything unlocked, and drove away. He glanced at his watch as he left, carrying the weight of his choices with him. Jim received a watch last Father's Day from Linda and the kids. The ad for the watch had said it was for the man who gives everything and expects nothing in return. Jim thought that was a bit much, but he liked the watch. He thought it was pricey, but Linda had actually gotten it on sale for $79. Late one night, around 1:30 a.m., Jim drove to the office of L.W. Stearns, an old family friend who saw Jim as a son. L.W. always believed Jim and Linda were perfect for each other. Jim parked and dozed off in his car, setting his phone alarm for 8 a.m. When the alarm woke him, he finished his leftover coffee and made a phone call. He needed help and wanted to sort things out before anyone noticed he was gone. He called L.W., asking him to come to the office with a notary. L.W. asked if Linda was okay and agreed to help, asking Jim not to do anything rash. Soon, L.W. arrived, and they went into his office in a tall building downtown. L.W. had been like a father to Jim since Jim's dad died when he was 3. Inside, they got straight to business. Jim explained everything that had happened from the weekend to that morning. He was upset, but kept his emotions in check. Jim revealed he wanted to leave everything behind, including Linda and the kids, just like a scene from a movie. He wondered if the kids were even his and expressed frustration over Linda's actions. He wanted to leave without taking anything but his $401k and pension, setting those aside for the kids when they turned 21. L.W. was shocked by how hurt Jim was, reminding him of his toughest experiences, including his service in Vietnam and losing his wife. L.W. confirmed they could arrange everything legally. Jim could disappear, and if Linda filed for divorce, she'd have to find him first. This decision would hurt many, especially the kids and Jim's mom. L.W. asked if Jim wanted to consider counseling instead, but Jim was too hurt to consider reconciliation. He felt betrayed and could only think of leaving everything behind. "No, I won't tolerate this. She did it, and now she has to face what comes next, just like I did." He thought to himself, "Is this what I really want?" He wished it was all just a bad dream, but he knew that wouldn't happen. He couldn't imagine sitting in a small room, talking it over with someone who'd tell him to just forget and forgive. It was a big mistake, they would say. She still loves me. Think about the kids. We can get through this. But after dealing with all the legal mess and arguments, could they really move past it? No way, Jim thought. He felt wronged and deep down, broken. He wanted his life back, but knew it wouldn't be the same. So, if his life was over, theirs might be too. He tried to hold back tears as he breathed deeply and cleared his throat. Just then, Penny Wilson, his assistant, entered the room. She saw Jim and another man having a serious talk and hesitated, but the man invited her over. He introduced her to Jim and mentioned they needed some documents taken care of. Penny nodded and fetched her equipment. She was professional, not showing any judgment, though Jim could tell she wasn't fond of his soon-to-be ex-wife. They prepared a separation agreement and power of attorney, and signed everything right there. Jim gave Penny the letters for his kids and shook hands with everyone, feeling a heavy sadness. Why wasn't he more upset? He left, and despite the gloomy day, it didn't feel as terrible as expected. Then he went to the bank, withdrew money and closed his account, leaving just a little. He drove to a gas station, filled up his truck, and then stopped at an internet cafe. He had a coffee, went online, and sent out files to everyone important, canceled credit cards, and reported them stolen. After finishing his coffee, he left. The weather was starting to clear as he drove east. By mid-afternoon, he found himself in Maryland, in a quiet town with not much happening. He stopped at Sally's, a small restaurant, and went in. The place was nearly empty. He noticed a rental ad on a bulletin board and asked Sally, the waitress, about it. She sized him up without looking away, then offered to help him find a room and possibly a job. After a brief phone call, she assured someone he seemed like a good fit. Sally then put away her phone, smiled, and asked if he was hungry. It was time for a late lunch. Maybe a roast beef sandwich, salad with ranch dressing, and sweet tea sounded good. "Sounds good, right?" she said with a big smile. Then she turned to make my lunch. I wondered how everything would turn out. The lunch was delicious and even came with sweet coleslaw, a pleasant surprise. I was almost done with my tea and food, enjoying the coleslaw slowly. Then the screen door opened and it felt like my future walked in. The woman looked Asian, maybe in her 40s, and was tall and athletic. The man appeared to be in his 60s but looked strong and fit, like he could be on a Marine Corps poster. He was dressed in a casual t-shirt, jeans, and aviator sunglasses. He helped the woman sit next to me and then sat on my other side, taking off his sunglasses and cap. He looked at me intensely with deep brown eyes. I joked, "Please take a seat," as I looked between them. The diner wasn't busy, just a few other customers and one waitress managing everything. It seemed these two were here to interview me. I met the man's gaze steadily. The woman introduced herself as Maya Lowell and her husband as Joshua. "Hello," Joshua grunted, not taking his eyes off me. He seemed to be studying me. Maya continued talking, and I turned to listen to her. She asked for my name, where I was from, and why I was here. I took a deep breath, pulled out my driver's license, and introduced myself. I shared a bit of my story but didn't go into much detail. Maya asked if I was married and had kids. I hesitated but answered yes. When she asked where they were, I got a bit defensive. "Don't know, not interested. Look, I haven't done anything illegal. It might not be nice, but that's not your concern. If you're going to check on me, I'd rather leave. I keep my word. Maybe not in every way, but I survive," I said. Just then, a deep voice interrupted from behind, saying, "That's enough." I turned to see Joshua. His expression was serious, but his gaze had softened. He looked right at me, then began talking about renting an apartment. "Rent is $150 per month, paid in cash. It's the last one available here, and the price is up because it's in demand. I'm a man of my word, and that's the rent. If you're interested, come see the place with us," he offered. I was surprised and asked if we were really going to shake on it. "Like I said, I'm a man of my word," he replied. I thought for a moment, then agreed. "Okay, let's go." I asked for the bill, and the waitress handed me a check for $5.12. "Including tax?" I joked. She grinned widely and nodded. I left a $1.11 tip, thanked her, and followed Joshua and Maya out. Joshua greeted some deputies outside and then led me to his car, a sturdy black Jeep. "Follow us," he instructed. He helped Maya into the car, and they shared a quick smile and kiss. It was the first time I saw him smile. His serious face returned as he got into the driver's seat and we drove off. I followed them closely, their Jeep easy to spot with its unique decals. We drove to a secluded area with bungalows on stilts, each quaint and private. They stopped at the last one, a blue house with white shutters, right by the river. I parked and joined them, curious about the place and ready to see what was next. The locals walked up the stairs and onto the porch, and I took the ramp. It was sturdy, set in concrete, with a non-slip surface. At the top, they opened the door and welcomed me inside. The house had a small hallway with a kitchen on one side and a tiny bathroom opposite. The hallway ended with a bedroom overlooking the river on one side and a living room with a view of distant hills on the other. The windows opened onto a wraparound porch. Both the bedroom and living room had ceiling fans, and there was a cozy wood-burning stove in the living room. There was no other way to heat or cool the place. The ceilings were low and it all felt snug and well-made. It was small, about 200 square feet, but perfect for a quiet weekend away. Jim turned to the locals. "I'll take it," he said. "But how will you pay for it? Do you have a job?" they asked. "Not yet," Jim replied. "What skills do you have?" Jim mentioned he was a trained aircraft mechanic and also skilled in carpentry and operating a forklift. Joshua, one of the locals, seemed impressed. "How about working for minimum wage at Hideaway Marina? You can wear our t-shirt and jeans," he suggested. "There are also local charities that could use some help. Just remember to be honest and fair, or you'll be out," he warned. Jim agreed with a nod. "Understood, boss," he said, smiling. "Be there at 6 tomorrow morning. Come early if you want breakfast," Joshua added, shaking Jim's hand to seal the deal. Over time, Jim learned Joshua's story. Joshua had been a Marine scout in Vietnam, where he rescued Mai and her family. They moved to the U.S. with the help of a charity. Joshua found Mai in California, married her, and converted to her faith, which wasn't easy for his family to accept. After serving in 2 more deployments, Joshua retired with honors. They had 4 children, all of whom joined the military. Their daughter became a lawyer after serving and was now in a serious relationship. As for me, I worked hard on improving my carpentry and mechanical skills. I became well-liked in town and was eventually hired full-time. I even started a small business employing a former convict and a veteran. We built a good reputation locally. 2.5 years later, I was settled and respected. I shared my story with Joshua and Mai. Mai was upset to hear what had happened. "How could a mother do that? And you have children too?" she asked. "Yes, but I'm still not over it," I admitted. Joshua listened quietly, offering little advice but observing much. "You're still hurting," he finally said. "You chose a tough path, but it's the only one you saw." Everyone knew my story, and while they understood my actions, they saw that I was still struggling. I had no social life beyond my new community. I owed that isolation to Linda, who had left me broken over a fleeting thrill. Why? Because she felt entitled to it. She never considered my feelings at all. She put her own wants ahead of her family and her caring husband. Why? Just because she felt like it. I really don't understand why. All I know is that I spent a lot of time thinking it over. I struggled with the idea of leaving, looking at it from every angle. In the end, I wasn't any closer to an answer, but I started to move past the anger and disgust I felt. Now, 3 years later, I feel like I'm stuck in a prison I made for myself. I'm kept here by her betrayal and my own inaction. I almost forgot about the fear of being found, and part of me even welcomes it. But things are about to change. I consider myself a good person. That Sunday morning after church, I was leaving a small grocery store. I didn't need a gun anymore. I just carried a legal baton for safety. As I was walking to my truck, I saw 2 guys trying to steal from a young woman by her car. She was screaming and struggling, but no one else noticed because of the time and place. I couldn't just stand by and watch. I put my groceries on my truck and ran over with my baton ready. I got their attention and saw one of them pull out a gun. It was too late to back down. I struck his wrist with the baton, hearing a painful crack. I pushed him into his accomplice, knocking them both over. The adrenaline was pumping. Then I faced the woman. She was short and looked like someone you'd see at a library, with long brown hair and glasses. She was frantic, trying to open her car door. I called for help on my phone. It was Mike Lowell, the son of a family friend. I told him about the possible robbery and kidnapping, as there was a child in the back seat. Mike said they were on their way. I made sure the attackers stayed down, collected the gun, and approached the woman. She was still trying to open the door, so I helped her. Inside was a little girl about 4 or 5. "Are you okay?" I asked. The girl nodded through her tears and thanked me. The woman was relieved and asked if I was a cop. I joked, "No, but I play one on TV," and laughed for the first time in a long while. Just then, the police arrived with Mike. They took the gun for evidence. I quickly explained everything to Mike and apologized to the woman for my joke. Things felt upside down again when I introduced myself. "I'm Jim Carlisle. I didn't mean to scare you. Are you and the child okay?" She was unsure at first. The police and an ambulance were there now, treating everyone involved. Mike confirmed to her that I was trustworthy. She thanked me again, introducing herself as Emma Lindo. I was struck by her name. It reminded me of my daughter. What more could happen? Mike, not catching the name similarity, asked, "Is Linda okay?" That threw me off. I stumbled and Mike had to support me. I was completely overwhelmed and confused. "Linda, no, please, not this." Then Mike realized the misunderstanding and tried to calm me down. "Pull yourself together, Jim. These girls aren't yours." Then he realized Emma didn't understand what was happening. He turned to her, quickly apologized, and tried to explain. Jim had had some tough times in the past. His ex-wife's name was Linda, and his daughter's name was Emma, but that's all he wanted to say. "He's a good man," Emma said. "I trust him completely and I'll always support him." Jim was surprised. "Wow, I didn't know you thought so highly of me. I thought you were just putting up with me." He straightened up, feeling a bit better but also embarrassed. He started to apologize, stuttering and mumbling. He was about to leave when Emma stopped him. "Jim, everything's fine. Just breathe and relax." Jim calmed down, and another police officer came over to get our statements. As we gave our information, little Linda stared at me like I was from another planet. Then Emma asked if I wanted to have lunch at Sally's, one of my favorite places. Mike saw my reaction and grinned. I frowned at him and he chuckled. "Go have lunch, Jim, and take your time," he said, then left. I turned to Emma, who was observing me. "I'm a bit hungry," I said. "And since you're a guy, you must be hungry too. Let's go, my treat as a thank you." I hadn't felt this normal in over 3 years, so we walked to Sally's, a short walk since the town was small. Inside it was cool, but I felt warm. Sally greeted us and showed us to a table. She joked about a hero discount, which made Emma laugh. "News travels fast," she said. Sally mentioned that Mike had already been talking about me on the radio. Sally and some locals who recognized us joined in the conversation, praising me. It seemed the whole town might soon know my story. Sally recommended the grilled chicken special for lunch, which sounded good to everyone. Emma then started to share more about herself. She was 29, had been divorced for 3 years, and her ex-husband, whom she didn't have a good relationship with, had passed away. She was an accountant and ran a small business with her best friend and a notary. Just then, she became emotional, reflecting on the day's events. Seeing her upset, I hugged her, and her daughter Linda started crying too, so I comforted her as well. It felt good to be there for them. Emma explained that some mutual friends had hoped we'd meet, and it would help me recover. It seemed fate had its own plans for us. We knelt together for a minute, and I felt a rush of emotions. For the first time in 3 years, I felt normal and whole. It was a surprise to feel this way again. Looking at the kind woman next to me and the little girl crying in our arms, I didn't want it to end. At that moment, I caught Sally's eye. She looked concerned and didn't smile as she usually did. She placed our iced teas and apple juice on the table. I tried to explain, but Emma, still emotional from the day's events, cut me off with a sob. Sally nodded understandingly as I sat back down, moving my chair closer to Emma and her daughter. Sally's smile returned, and she winked at me as she walked away. I straightened up, took a long sip of my iced tea, and faced Emma. "Okay, it's my turn," I began. I apologized for reacting so strongly when we met. I explained that hearing her and her daughter's names, which were the same as my wife's and daughter's, but in reverse, caught me off guard. "Sorry about that," I said. I shared my story, keeping it straightforward without dwelling on the painful details. I told her about the betrayal and how I felt abandoned in a really tough way. I mentioned that I wasn't proud of my actions but saw no other way out at the time. Could I have done something different? Probably, I admitted, reflecting on the past 3 years. As I shared my story, it felt like a fog was lifting from my mind. Emma listened intently. It turned out that she was quite familiar with dealing with tough situations, both in her personal and professional life. As I continued, I explained how I dealt with the separation, how I managed the financial aspects, and how I left things with my wife. At one point, I noticed Emma seemed concerned as I repeated parts of my story. I paused and looked into her eyes, seeing a kind, understanding look. I glanced at her daughter, who seemed calm and innocent. This reminded me of my own daughter and how she might react. Emma's smile briefly appeared as she reassured me. "Mr. Carlyle, I'm sorry for all you've been through, but you need to heal, and only you can do that. I've been through something similar, so I understand." Our dinner arrived, and we enjoyed our meal while chatting about life in Golden Beach. Emma had moved here 4 years ago after her husband was arrested, and her daughter was just over 5. As we finished, Emma stood up, gathered her things, and prepared to leave. "Women always seem to spread their belongings everywhere when they sit down." She reached out for a handshake, which felt more meaningful and lasted a bit longer than usual. She smiled and left with her daughter. I sat back down, realizing she had left me with the bill. "That's typical," I thought with a smile. Sally came by with the bill, encouraging me, "Don't mess this up. She's a keeper." I left the restaurant feeling better than I had in years, satisfied and hopeful. Over the following months, I bumped into Emma several times and even invited her and her daughter for ice cream. I was starting to feel more human. The next morning, I went to the marina restaurant as usual, and later, I serviced 2 boats for their owners. The week went by, and I learned there would be a barbecue at the Lowells on Friday. I was invited, and it looked like I would be spending my Friday at a barbecue. Sounds good, doesn't it? I thought to myself. On Friday, I went about my morning, blissfully unaware of the developments around me, yet somehow decisions were forming on their own. The boat owners arrived to pick up their boats, and I showed them around, explaining what to check and our operating hours, especially for the fuel station. These people were regulars on weekends, though not locals. After sorting things out and working on some mechanical tasks, I left work at 4 p.m., cleaned up, and changed into a fresh t-shirt and jeans for a BBQ. I was almost like family to them. I reached the Lowell's spacious log ranch home, which had a large deck, a patio with a jacuzzi, and a pool. The barbecue was already going, and many people were there. Mike greeted me warmly, and soon I was chatting with everyone. May Angelina, their youngest daughter and a well-known lawyer who had served in the Marine Corps, pulled me aside. She seemed serious about the young doctor she was with, and everyone was watching them closely. "Jim, how have you been?" she asked. "I've seen you a few times over the years, and I've heard good things, though some were a bit troubling. There's someone very interested in you. Can we talk?" I was surprised, but agreed. We sat under a big tree with Mike and his wife, Camille. They handed out drinks, beer for us, and wine for the ladies. May started explaining that she had been assigned to look into my situation about 1.5 years ago. Joshua, I noticed, was nearby but not joining us. May explained she'd been working with my lawyer without revealing my location or details, just gathering information. Then she asked me about the current situation back in Cicero, Illinois, which she had looked into. Just then, Robert, her boyfriend, came over. He was cheerful, but left us to continue our conversation when May asked him to give us a moment. "I'm the only one who knows all this," she said, "and I want to share it with you because here, you're family too." Mike suggested I stick to iced tea to stay sharp for the conversation. Angie, as she was called in the family, continued, "So, are you ready to hear everything? It's not as bad as being in prison, but it's important." She shared that after an incident at home, there was confusion and panic. The police were called, and she described a chaotic scene, but it was unclear what really happened. The police secured the house, and the details remained murky. Angie watched for my reaction, ready to tell me more about the unfolding situation. I heard from a reliable source that there was tension and confusion. She was clearly amused by the chaos, laughing and looking quite pleased. Jim anticipated what was next and smiled. The police were confused and slightly annoyed, wanting to understand what was happening. Then her parents arrived, and the situation really escalated. Everyone had seen her emails and messages by then, and her family and friends were overwhelmed with calls. She had caused such a mess that it couldn't be fixed easily. That's when news crews started showing up. Jim, along with Mike and Camille, looked at me astonished. Camille was speechless, and all Mike could say was, "Wow." Angie continued, explaining that after the police warned her about making false reports, they left, but the news crews stuck around. Her parents pulled her inside and opened all the windows to air out the house. They scolded her for the trouble she had caused. Eventually, they learned the full story. Her mother was shocked, and her father was furious with both of you, her for her reckless behavior and you for disappearing. The story blew up on social media and in the press. As part of the plan, LV pretended not to know where you were, making things even worse. Her father almost lost his patience, and when they couldn't find you, he told her to file for divorce. She put off the divorce for months while spending the money you left behind. It took almost 2 years for the divorce to be finalized. She ended up deep in debt, lost her job, and started drinking and hanging out with dubious characters. Her parents had to take custody of the children. Your mother sees them quite often, but Linda rarely does. Last week, she entered a rehabilitation clinic in poor condition. Her parents are worn out from taking care of the kids and trying to support Linda. Her being in rehab is somewhat of a relief for them, but they're still overwhelmed. Her mother's health is worsening, and her father's blood pressure is high. The mood was quite somber when Joshua and my uncle sat down. He continued, "Everyone in your family knows now. Mai and I don't. It's up to you what you want to share with us." Emma then joined me, standing at a distance. I wondered how much time I had left before everything fell apart. But how had they not found me? I had re-registered my truck, changed my driver's license, and I'm even on the payroll here. I even paid my taxes last year. Mike admitted, "Well, I did help a bit with that. When you updated your truck and license, I pulled some strings at the DMV. The forms you filled out got lost, and so did some searches. They weren't reviewed." Angelina added, "I filed your taxes for the first 2 years. Last year you did it yourself, so really no one's looking. Not the government, not your in-laws, not even the police. Maybe just your mom. She's worried. She's just frustrated with everyone and everything." Emma then reached out and squeezed my shoulder. I looked into her caring gray eyes and smiled. A sense of relief washed over me. I was free, surrounded by people who cared and encouraged me to do the right thing. "It's time to stop running," Joshua said firmly. I agreed. "You're right. No more running." I told everyone it was time to get our lives in order. I asked if someone could watch Linda while Emma and I took a walk by the river. Camilla reassured us, "Don't worry, she'll be fine." Emma took my hand, and we walked away. Angelina stood up, hugged me, and then started explaining the situation to her parents. Emma and I followed a path leading north, quickly surrounded by the forest. After a few minutes, we found a large fallen tree by the river, a perfect spot to sit. Emma invited me to sit next to her on the tree trunk. It seemed like a good idea, so I sat down, taking in our peaceful surroundings. The boat owners came to get their boats, and I helped them understand the updates and what to look out for. These folks were regular weekend visitors, but not from around here. After sorting things out and finishing some mechanical work, I left my full-time job at 4 p.m., cleaned up, and changed into fresh clothes for a barbecue since I was almost like family. I arrived at the Lowell's big log-style ranch house. It had a large deck, a patio with a jacuzzi, and a pool. The barbecue was already busy with many guests. Mai greeted me warmly, and soon I was mingling with everyone, including May Angelina, their youngest daughter, who is a well-known lawyer and former Marine. She seemed serious about her relationship with a young doctor. "Jim, how have you been?" May asked. I've heard good things about you, though some were a bit concerning. Someone is really interested in you. Can we talk?" Surprised, I agreed. We sat under a large tree with Mike and his wife Camille joining us. May explained she had been looking into my situation for about a year and a half on behalf of my lawyer without revealing where I was or what was wrong. Robert, May's boyfriend, briefly joined us, cheerful, but quickly excused himself when May asked for more time to talk. "I'm the only one who knows all this," she continued, "and I want to share it with you because you're part of the family here." Mike handed me an iced tea, suggesting I stay alert for our conversation. Angie, as she was called in the family, began, "Are you ready to hear everything? It's not as bad as being in prison, but it's important." She described a confusing and chaotic situation at home where the police were involved, but details were unclear. Angie was ready to tell me more about what was happening. She had a plan to help me resolve my issues and even suggested contacting an architect she knew to help me build a house for my family. "We'll get Angelina to sort out the custody issues and handle any legal matters later," she said, her face beaming with a plan. We discussed building a new home with enough space for my family, including a separate section for my mom, linked by a covered walkway. We talked about possibly renting my current place to Linda's parents if they wanted to be close to their grandchildren. Emma and I then sat down with the architect, who shared some designs and gave us a price estimate, which was surprisingly affordable. On Monday, I planned to apply for a construction loan. Angie was going to contact my lawyer to start discussing my case. I hadn't taken any vacation days since I started at the marina, so I had almost 4 weeks available, which Joshua assured me I could use to sort things out back in Illinois. "Your job will be here when you get back," he said, emphasizing the importance of family. Meanwhile, Angie had a clever approach to my case, which she planned to discuss further. We were hopeful and excited about what the future held. We often talked on Skype and via email. Emma and I kept in touch, but I needed to be absolutely sure about us. Meanwhile, young Linda was doing her best to win me over. Her behavior changed a lot. She enjoyed being around me and started holding my hand wherever we went. She was always smiling and laughing more when I was near. She even started asking for goodnight kisses and hugs, which her mom and I happily gave, though we kept things appropriate. I was still feeling overwhelmed by everything, but Emma was patient and supportive. Linda then pushed things forward by asking, "When are you going to propose to my mom? I'm getting old and I really need a dad. You'd be perfect." Can you believe she's only 5? My court case went smoother than expected. I hadn't done anything illegal. Maybe it wasn't the best behavior, but nothing serious. Her parents supported me. To make things even better, I shared our plans to move in together, which Ivy and Angie explained to them. They had thought I didn't want to talk to them because of a misunderstanding caused by their lender, but they were eager to make amends. Over the next 3 years, things progressed well for me. I started a small business doing odd jobs and home renovations. I now managed 2 teams of 3 workers each. I felt much better, and my home became a source of pride for me. The construction was fast. We set up the structure with a tin roof in just 2 months. Emma, Linda May, Angelina, Camilla, and Sally all helped decorate. Then I got a court date. Linda had just come out of rehab and was struggling. Elvie began the process of selling the house before it was auctioned off. So I packed my truck, said goodbye to my loved ones, and drove to Cicero. Angie planned to fly there soon for the trial. Returning home after almost 4 years felt odd. My neighborhood hadn't changed much, but my house looked neglected. The lawn was overgrown and the paths needed cleaning. I just drove by, more interested in seeing my mom and apologizing for any worry I caused. Mom greeted me warmly at the door, covering me in kisses. I felt mostly forgiven, though her tears made me apologize again. Her smile made everything better, and she ushered me inside. She said someone special was coming over soon, but for now, she just wanted to hug me. A couple of hours later, Ivy arrived with Penny Wilson. After introductions, we got down to business discussing the upcoming trial. The judge was known to be strict but fair, disliking dishonesty but also critical of fathers who abandon their families. Our chances were mixed. Ivy briefed me on Linda's lawyer's likely strategies. They wouldn't be seeking child support or spousal support. He was confident in our case, although I sensed they might be keeping something from me. On Friday, I drove to meet Angie at the airport. She greeted me with a bright smile. I joked with her, and she playfully hit me back. It felt good to catch up on everything I'd missed. Angelina updated me last week, saying Robert Taylor had been very supportive of my case. I was really grateful for his support. When we got home, I introduced Angie to my mom, who welcomed her warmly. The next day, we met Ivy and Penny on the 5th floor of Ivy's office. After some coffee, they laid out everything about the case. Angelina brought everyone up to speed with her findings. Everyone seemed determined, probably for my sake, but I still felt like I wasn't getting the whole story. Angelina assured me that things were looking good for the trial on Monday. I had my doubts, but chose to trust them. My life was improving, and I hoped for the best. After promising myself to go to church, we finished our meeting and headed home for dinner. I was so distracted I don't even remember what we ate. After dinner, I quickly excused myself, took a shower, and went to bed, ready for what was to come. At 9 p.m., I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, repeating every prayer I knew and making up a few new ones. I prayed to St. Michael and the Blessed Virgin a lot, but didn't bother God too much, thinking he might not want to hear my complaints. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was 6:30 a.m. and the sun was shining through the window. I got up, went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, shaved, and then went for coffee. After that, I made it to morning mass around 8. During the service, I didn't take communion or stand up much. I just kept my head down and prayed. After mass, a man told me another service was starting soon if I wanted to stay. I thanked him but decided to leave, noticing a few curious looks from others. I drove by the lake in the cold wind until the evening, then headed home. My mom was really worried about where I had been, but I reassured her I was okay and just needed some alone time. Actually, I felt more at peace. I ate a bologna sandwich, drank a Coke, said goodnight to my mom, and went to sleep feeling more prepared than I had in a long time. Monday morning was clear and fresh. I got to the courthouse early for the trial that was set to start at 9 a.m. In the courthouse, I met up with Angie and Penny just as they were about to enter the courtroom. We greeted each other, and then I saw Linda. She looked very different from the woman I had loved for 12 years, worn and tired. Makeup couldn't hide the signs of her recent hardships. I couldn't help feeling a bit better about my own health since I'd been working outdoors and eating well. She tried to approach me, but her friends held her back and guided her into the courtroom. Angie commented on how rough Linda looked, and although I agreed, it felt harsh to say it out loud. Just then, the elevator doors opened, and my mom and Linda's parents arrived. They all hugged me, and Linda's dad shook my hand, showing their support. We all entered the courtroom together. Inside, some people, including a couple who looked like reporters, were already seated. Linda and her group sat across from us. The courtroom proceedings began promptly, with the judge announcing the case. It was about the custody of my 2 children and other related issues. The lawyers introduced themselves and the judge confirmed the details of the case. Linda then stood up, claiming I thought she was an unfit mother. The judge asked about our divorce, which was clearly a sensitive topic. As the discussion heated up, Linda became overwhelmed and couldn't continue. Her lawyer stood up to defend her, but it was clear the situation was complex. The judge recognized there was more to the story than was apparent, suggesting we would soon learn the full truth. Your Honor, there's no reason to bring up accusations of sexual misconduct here. They're irrelevant to this case. Alvy couldn't help but smile broadly, and even Angelina grinned. The judge looked surprised and asked, "Sexual misconduct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I responded. "Miss Kramer, can you clarify?" Linda looked down, unable to speak. The judge paused, then asked, "Can you tell us honestly what happened that night, Miss Kramer? You're not under oath now, but we can swear you in if needed." Linda replied, "I can't, I won't, you can't make me." Now the judge looked confused. He turned to LW. "Can Mr. Carlyle explain what happened that night?" LW looked at me and I was ready to speak. "Please swear me in, Your Honor. I'll explain everything." Suddenly, Schultz, the opposing lawyer, objected. "Your Honor, we shouldn't listen to a biased story about that night." "Objection overruled," said the judge. The bailiff brought the Bible to me. "Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" I looked the judge in the eyes and took the oath. "Please state your name and address for the record," he instructed. "James Carlisle, Hideaway Marina, Golden Beach, Maryland," I replied. The judge then asked me to describe what happened that night. I told him everything, from when we left our house until Linda went to the restroom and didn't return. I didn't leave out any details. Looking at Linda, who seemed uncomfortable hearing this, I continued. "She left me that night without a word, going off with another man. There was no discussion or explanation. She just left. So I went home alone, just as she had left me. I wasn't proud of leaving, but I felt I had no choice." I paused, then added, "At least I left her a note." The courtroom was silent except for Linda's sobbing. Suddenly she shouted, "You left me and our children, you scoundrel!" I responded firmly. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. "I will have order, or I will take measures against both parties." Her lawyer was upset. He didn't want these details discussed, especially not by me or at the judge's request. The judge leaned forward, looking at Linda. "Miss Kramer, is Mr. Carlisle's account accurate? Please answer truthfully. A lot depends on your response." Linda looked devastated. Her dream scenario crumbled under the harsh reality. Finally, she admitted, "Yes, sir. Everything he said is true. I ruined everything." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carlisle, I understand the stress you were under, but abandoning your family for 4 years is serious." I was fuming and ready to argue, but Angie quickly pulled me back to my seat. She then spoke to the judge. "Your Honor, may I speak on behalf of Mr. Carlisle?" A new lawyer, Maya Angelina Lowell, stood up. "Who are you?" the judge inquired. "Maya Angelina Lowell, Mr. Carlisle's attorney from Maryland," she replied. Joshua Lowell then spoke up. "Your Honor, when I first met James, he was a broken man looking for a place to stay. I decided to give him a chance at our marina because I trust my instincts about people, and I wasn't wrong. He's improved a lot." Joseph added, "I haven't known Jim as long as others, but I can vouch he's a good man." Then Joshua Jr. chimed in. "I agree with my brother. Though I don't know Mr. Carlisle well, from what I've seen, he's respectable." Finally, Mike spoke. "Your Honor, my wife and I have known Jim for about 4 years. We trust him completely, even with our children. They call him Uncle Jim. He's also a local hero, having thwarted a robbery and saved a mother and her daughter. He's proven himself in our community." The judge listened intently, considering the testimonies about my character and actions. Camille gave him a nod, and he nodded back at the judge. Sally was the last to speak. "Your Honor, when Jim Carlisle first walked into my restaurant, he looked tired and troubled. I didn't know then how much he was hurting. Now I can see he's grown a lot, and I'm proud to think of him like a grandson." She then praised Jim's mom for raising him well. I feel like I could run for president with all this praise, I thought to myself. But then Angie continued, saying there was one more person to speak. I turned around and there was Emma Lindell, stepping forward confidently. She asked the judge if she could speak on my behalf. Linda looked upset as Emma introduced herself as the woman Jim had saved from attackers in Maryland. The courtroom got noisy, and the judge had to call for order. "Your Honor, I've known James Carlisle for about 1.5 years. He is honorable and kind," Emma said, glancing at Linda with a look that everyone noticed. She explained how she had grown close to Jim since he helped her, though they had kept things proper. Linda muttered angrily to her lawyer, prompting the judge to call for silence again. Emma added, "I've been patient, waiting for James to heal. This custody case is a big step for him, and I hope it goes in his favor." Then she boldly declared her love for Jim. The judge thanked Emma for her honesty. Suddenly, Linda screamed, "No!" and ran out of the courtroom. The judge called for her to be stopped, but she was already gone. Her lawyer requested a break, which the judge granted, setting a 2-hour pause. As everyone stood, I turned to Emma. "So you love me?" I asked. She was shocked, but then admitted she did, and I confessed I felt the same. We then went to a steakhouse for lunch with our friends and family, who were all supportive and happy for us. My lawyer, Angie, was especially proud of how the hearing was going. Another lawyer, El Vi, even joked that if Angie ever wanted to leave Maryland, she should work with him. When we returned to court, we found out Linda had disappeared. Surprisingly, her legal team presented documents where she agreed to my terms and gave up her rights as a parent. I was shocked. My lawyers reassured me that everything was settled. I had won. "It's over, Jim," Angie said. "You don't even have to fight anymore." But I still had to pick up my children from school who didn't know about any of this yet. As we went to the school, reporters tried to talk to us, but we decided to make a statement later. At school, my kids ran out and were initially surprised to see me with a woman they didn't recognize. The kids paused for a moment and then burst into excitement. "Daddy, Daddy!" they yelled as they ran towards me, jumping around. There were hugs and kisses everywhere. "We missed you. Where were you? Why didn't you call? What happened? Why was Mom so angry? Where is Mom?" They had many questions, and it seemed no one had explained anything to them. I hugged them tightly while Emma Lindell watched from a distance, careful not to intrude. I stood up and introduced her to the kids. "Kids, this is Mrs. Lindell. She's a good friend of mine. How about we go to my grandparents' place, have lunch, meet some of my friends, and have a fun time?" They agreed, grabbed their backpacks, and we all headed to my grandparents' car because it had child seats. At my grandparents' house, the kids ran into the backyard where a party was already in full swing. After everyone had eaten and the kids learned they could miss school tomorrow, they cheered. It was then time for a serious talk. 3 grandparents, Elve, Angie, and at my insistence, Emma Lindell, joined me. I told the children that their mother had left and we didn't know where she was, but we would try to find her. They seemed a bit upset but not surprised, as it wasn't the first time she had disappeared. This was one reason her parents had filed for custody. The kids had been living fully with their grandparents, with all their belongings. So, here's the thing, guys. I went to court for custody of you, which your grandparents support, and I won. Your mom agreed to it. Now you have a choice. You can move and live with me, or stay here with your grandparents. It's your choice. I'll answer any questions when you're ready, but some things might be hard to understand. My daughter spoke up first. "She cheated on you, didn't she, Dad? There were different men every few weeks. It was awful." Tommy added that Mark was the worst. The room fell silent as Emma Lindell moved closer, squeezing my hand for support. Tommy then asked if Emma was my girlfriend. I blushed and looked down. "Well, yes," I admitted. Emma stepped back playfully and nudged me. Little Emma laughed and whispered to Tommy, "Oh yeah, she's definitely his friend." Then the conversation shifted. "You know, my name is Emma too," she said, looking at my friend. Big Emma replied, "But my friends call me Emma. I like it." Little Emma, whose real name is Emily, said she liked being called Emma too, which is what her friends called her. My son, who was 9 and very perceptive, watched the exchange closely. He turned to me and said, "I think she's right for you, Dad." The conversation felt more promising than I could have ever hoped. Over the next 2 days, I discussed many things with my in-laws and my mother. I talked about the house I built, the proposal for them to sell their houses, and move to Maryland with us. The kids were excited to move, especially knowing their grandparents were coming too. Everyone agreed it was time for a change. We managed everything since Linda had disappeared. Elvi helped my mother sell her house, which involved a big garage sale, donations to charity, and packing the rest for shipping. My in-laws put their house up for sale and started packing a large truck. The kids went back to school and we got all the necessary paperwork to move them to Maryland. I stayed to help everyone move. We drove back with the kids and my in-laws in one car, and my mom and I followed in a loaded truck. We spent one night at a motel and then reached Golden Beach. Camilla had arranged for therapists at the school to speak with the kids, but so far they were adjusting well. Still, there was no news about Linda. Once we arrived, I showed everyone our new home, and my father-in-law's new place was just a 5-minute walk away. After showing the kids and my mom the house, we visited my in-laws' new place, where Mai and Camilla gave us a tour and the keys. While everyone was settling in, I went back to my house and found Emma and Linda talking on the porch with my family. As I walked up, my daughter looked at me intensely. "So, will I have another sister besides the new mom?" she asked half-jokingly. "Oh, yeah, I guess," I replied, a bit caught off guard. She laughed and then hugged me tightly. Tommy commented on understanding why there were so many bedrooms but didn't look directly at me. We needed to keep an eye on him. Soon, my in-laws' belongings were all unloaded. A similar process happened with my mother's things. After thanking everyone, I treated them to dinner at Sally's and checked my bank account, realizing it was time to get back to work. Life was resuming. 2 young kids, new to our home, were getting used to everything. Linda got along well with everyone, and soon my family was adjusting well. Tommy and I bonded more, and it felt like it was us against the world, but all in good fun. If you have kids, you know how quickly things can change. They did well in school and were ready to start the next school year without any setbacks. Emma and I got married in mid-August in a small wedding and spent our honeymoon in New Orleans. Although I was still working on rebuilding my business, we spent most of our time just enjoying the hotel room and a few meals out, so the warm weather didn't really matter. Linda wasn't in the picture. With the support of great friends, both new and old, and an amazing, loyal, loving new wife, I rebuilt my life. Am I happy? Did I make the right choice back then? Maybe. It feels like it was the only choice I could have made. I consider myself lucky. That's really all I know for sure. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.